back for more. We are joined by Simon Frankel Pratt. He is a political science lecturer from the University of Melbourne. Simon, thank you very much for your time. We know that scores of countries already acknowledge Palestine as an independent state. So just how significant is the latest recognition by these three countries?
Well, I wouldn't say that Ireland, Spain, and Norway are Israel's closest allies, but they are allies and they are friends. And Israel has a long history of friendly and close relations with all three countries. So it's significant that these countries have decided to unilaterally recognize Palestine, that they have not maintained their earlier policy, which was in line with the US, which was that Palestine should be established through negotiation with Israel. And this maybe reflects a growing dissatisfaction amongst even Israel's friends and partners with the stagnated state of the peace process.
So Simon, the pressure keeps piling on. This announcement by the three European countries coming barely 2 days after the ICC's chief prosecutor said he would pursue arrest warrants against the Prime Minister and Yoav Gallant. But the consensus seems to be that this is not going to be changing the course of the Gaza war, nor the long conflict between Israel and Palestinians. So the question is, what's needed to make it work insofar as a Palestinian state is concerned?
I think that if you look at the text of the Analyst negotiations from about 15 years ago, or longer actually, you see that a lot of the groundwork is already there. And what matters is what is sometimes called political will and maybe credibility. And I think that in the short term, sure, under Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel is more content to become an increasing international pariah than it is to seriously recommit to negotiations. But in the longer term, I don't think most Israelis want to be pariahs, and I don't think that the Israeli public is willing to pay the long-term costs of pariah status or the long-term costs of being seen by many of its friends or former friends to be occupying a sovereign state that those international partners recognize as such. So the change won't be immediate, but I don't think this is insignificant at all.
So Simon, do you see the latest state recognition leading to more recognitions from other countries, perhaps, spur more European countries to consider this move?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question whether this is the start of a cascade. And I couldn't say for sure because I'm not a fly on the wall in the foreign ministries of other Israeli partners. I think the US is almost certainly going to continue to maintain its position that Palestine must be established through a process of negotiation with Israel. But I think that other European partners, possibly France, possibly, Germany is maybe a little less likely, but maybe even Germany in the longer run, I think that we will see more states do this. And I think that this will steadily increase the diplomatic pressure on Israel. And while Israel may have summoned the ambassadors of these countries to register complaints, I don't think they actually have the diplomatic levers to prevent other states from doing the same.
Simon, on the face of it, this almost looks like semantics. The US and the UK, among others, saying, they want a Palestinian state as part of a negotiated settlement, as opposed to what Norway and Ireland and Spain are saying is that they will recognize a Palestinian state. What's the important difference between the two here?
Well, since there are currently no negotiations, saying that they will only recognize a Palestine that emerges through negotiations is more or less tantamount to saying that for the time being, they will not recognize Palestine as a state. So the fact that some states are willing to do this, are willing to take the position, negotiations have stalled, they're unlikely to resume anytime soon, and we're impatient, and then offer that recognition, that is not mere semantics. That is the difference diplomatically between establishing relations, starting with recognition, and holding off. So I know that the international law, international diplomacy can seem awfully preoccupied with words and rhetoric. But words and rhetoric, when they come from powerful European states, actually have a great deal of influence over the conduct of international politics.
So what sort of challenges and opportunities might arise for the peace process in the Middle East following the recognition in the context of stalled negotiations? And worsening humanitarian conditions in Gaza?
I think Israelis, on the whole, are not really ready to begin a peace process or to resume the peace process. It's stalled, and I think that Israelis are still very much caught up in the trauma of 7 October, which continues for as long as the hostages remain in captivity. And so a traumatized and terrified people are usually not in a good position to carry on negotiations. Maybe this also goes for Palestinians, although they're not in quite the same position. But we know that the developing deal, the Saudi normalization deal with Israel, that this probably involves some return to negotiations as a condition. And I think that we'll see both regionally and globally mounting pressure on Israel to resume, and that the opportunities to do so are constantly being presented to Israel. And I know that when Israelis eventually vote for a new government, and I suspect it will be a very different government than the current one, they will have those opportunities to recommit to the peace process. I'm not sure whether there'll be much political will, and I'm not sure whether those who make up the next Israeli government will have the credibility. But I think that the opportunities will be there, and the risks of not doing it will continue to increase. Again, Israel will find itself increasingly isolated, even amongst its friends or former close allies.
All right, Simon, thank you very much for your time. We've been speaking to Simon Frankel, a lecturer of political science at the University of Melbourne.